All right. I guess it's kind of fitting that it's the two of us today, and yesterday was our 12-year business anniversary
Birthday.
of
Birthday.
starting that in a Starbucks in the city of Chicago, right in our, signing our souls away in some way, some might say.
10/23 was the S2 OGX birthday. I think of the anniversary as like the day we opened the building.
Right. Which was 2 years later.
Yeah, June 30th, right? 2014.
Yeah, 2014, right.
Yeah, so
and
I
that was
think
not
of that
when
as
we
like
opened the building. That was when we started renovating the building, but
okay.
took the building.
So, June 30th, 2014 was like our anniversary. I feel like that. But I feel like the birthday, the day we signed the business into existence was October 23rd. So that's how I separate them in my mind, birthday versus anniversary.
Yeah, it's been a ride.
Clearly that makes so much sense. So that's how my brain categorizes it.
Yeah. What we were thinking we were going to be doing at
oh my God.
Starbucks thing is not remotely what we're going to talk about today. So we really...
No. We were just like, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, I definitely don't think 12 years ago we were like, we're going to do biomechanics assessments one day. And that's going to be the road. But here we are.
This is not what this podcast is, but maybe it should be. What did we think? This is such a good example of when you're in your 20s and you're just not. You can only see as far as 28. Right. What did we think? We're just going to open a facility and we're just going to work there.
Yeah.
Every day. Just doing lessons until we're 40-some, 50-some years old. We had no end game. We were just no. This sounds great. We like it here right now. We're going to make a business.
We're going to quit your well-paying job. I didn't quit then. Not in 2012. We didn't know that. We weren't doing that yet. But we're just this seems...
But you know what I'm saying?
It's just
because we were such a small-minded...
We'll control it. It will be great. We'll be in control and
Totally.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Yes, you're just... I know. Anyway, that's not a dig for anyone
business
who owns
owners
facilities out there, because not to say it's not a good business, but that... it was not that we weren't considering the type of business we're starting. Is that going to work for us? Are we going to be able to do that when we're 45? That was never a conversation. We're 45 is half your life's basically over when you're 25, So we had no idea. Anyway, with that said, I'm glad we took the turn that we did X amount of years ago to create a type of business that's just, in my mind, much more fulfilling, much more impactful, and much more sustainable, I'd say.
Yeah, sustainable for sure. All right. Well, with that note, what we...
Yep. That's not the topic.
Yes. What we were going to first chat about today, I posted a tweet just about this. It's been some conversations we have been having in both hitting and pitching, sort of separately. We're working on a similar track, I think. And then in our full team meetings, we've been kind of presenting some things from each department. And so there was a lot of overlap in some of the concepts that we talked about in both hitting and pitching. So what it really is about from my standpoint, and what I was seeing in hitting, is that I think in the past 2 years, when kids come to us for hitting assessments or they start training with us, we have seen less of the sort of loads or starts that seem we're really off here. We aren't even using the right language. What I mean by that is there was a time where there were a lot of kids coming that had big weight transfers back. They had these big moves back, and they thought load was this back and let me sit back kind of move. We saw...
I'm not laughing, but I don't know. I just pictured that athlete with a foam visor on.
What we used to have. Yes. What we used to wear.
Yeah. That's that represents the sway it back. Bring your hands.
Right.
That's just the visual I just put in my head.
Yeah. And we had a lot of people starting really squatty. So kind of the in your legs concept, and you could see that there was a time that we were getting kids that our language as coaches was off, because we weren't even, across the board, we were seeing a lot of people. And I mean us as coaches more broadly, the hitting community. And softball was using things get back, stay back, get in your legs, whatever. And the way that we were interpreting it was pretty off from what actually happens in swings when you watch. And so what I will say,
I hear stay back a lot in like all through postseason baseball. Like, see how he stayed back on that.
Stayed back, yeah. But yeah,
whatever. Yeah. Another topic.
But what I have seen in the past, 2 years, 18 months ish, is that that's not a lot of the stories we see anymore. Like, I think generally the language in the hitting world has gotten a little closer to sort of universally using terms like hinge and coil, counter rotation. Like, there's just a variety of things that I think ways that people interpret it, but the concept of kind of, okay, the load or the first move or whatever terms people use is about this sort of like getting into your backside hinge move. It's not about this backwards move towards the catcher. And so we don't see a ton of that anymore. But what that has sort of like brought our attention to is that, and I think I referenced this yesterday for hitting, is that a lot of times in this like load phase, not in the load phase, but like in the time leading up to front foot down, which can mean a lot of different things in hitting, but the front foot coming down, is that at some point in that window, most of the athletes that come to us do get into the ranges of hinge and counter rotation in their pelvis that we would want them to get into. And so if we were just like, yeah, check, you hinged and you coiled or whatever, you hinged and you rotated on that back hip. And so we got into that, you would, think that I would say probably like 95% of the kids are doing it. But the problem is that it is almost always at the wrong time. Typically for hitting, we see it way too early. So because they're like, I'm supposed to hinge and I'm supposed to counter rotate, they do it right away. They might even start in it. Sometimes we see people like try to start in it. And they do it right away in this like very first thing they do. And then inevitably it unravels as they're going into the load. And so what happens in hitting is what we really want is that load to be happening kind of right before the front foot comes down, because then the ground uncoils it. You uncoil at the time that you can use the ground to help you. And that's what creates stretch in the right area. And if any other time that you do it is kind of like, that was a fun ride, but that really had no purpose. And so this timing concept has become something that we've been talking about in hitting and trying to also use the right like language and explanation with our athletes for them to get it. Because, I think we kind of fell into the same boat where we were like, this is what you're trying to do. And they were like, that's great, I'm doing that. But they weren't doing it at the right time. And then things were unraveling. And so I think you have come across some similar but different, because obviously the motions are very different, but concepts in pitching, maybe if you just want to give like a high level of some of the things that we've seen there.
Yeah, I think like going back to what you're describing when everybody kind of like did something different, that I still think that exists in pitching. And because pitching is like generally just behind, where people are doing things and it's like, what? Or like you see someone on TV, so everyone's like, that's what you need to do. And like, that the pitching coach world lives in the like, if my one athlete is good, I make all of my athletes like look like that, So I still think we have some of that in pitching, but the reality is where that comes from is when we don't know what the hell we're talking about. And right. X amount of years ago, none of us knew what the hell we're talking about because there's no information to tell us what is good, what we're going for. Like without the data, without the information, you don't know. And we're not talking just ball flight. I mean, you've got to see biomechanics data, right? I mean, it's why obviously we feel so strongly about pouring ourselves into the like UNO world with the UNO lab and that data and like having force plates and understanding and what good looks like. Because like we just don't have it. So it's a guess. And then we start to like, okay, but we've got enough video now where we can see what athletes are looking like. And this is the world that I feel like we know better at OGX. We know that it's not like a matter of getting into positions in these like static moves, like freezer at this point, does she look good? Freezer at this point, does she look good? Like we know better than that. But what I was really talking about coming out of this college debrief world is that, but the report we have still kind of looks like that. Like it's saying, are you in position in this phase? Are you in position in this phase? And we're like, no, that's not what we're doing here. But like, is that clear from the way that we're showing the data? And so oftentimes in the debriefs we give, we have to like make that clear. You know what I mean?
Right.
So what I was saying is like, what's important to understand about whether it's hitting, whether it's pitching, is that What we're going for is the transfer of energy through rotational stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And when things are not stretching at all, that's not good, right? Like if they're not creating rotational stretch at all, you can't transfer energy well. Like if pitchers are like collapsing forward, the arms out here, like you can't see where my body and arm are in space in this camera, but you get the idea, you know, like if things are not in posture enough to rotate, that's not good because we're not even creating rotational stretch. But assuming we're in decent enough position to create some rotational stretch out of it, the ability for the body to send the energy into the arm, for the body to send the energy, obviously the ground into the body, into the arm, the ground into the body, into the bat. That's the transfer of it. And the transfer of it requires it to be on time with one another.
Right.
So one of the things that I was saying is like a couple years ago, this is a good example. A couple years ago, I guess discovered, I don't know if that's right, trunk arm timing. I don't know. Is that safe to say?
Yeah.
I was just basically like with a pen and paper. I'm pretty sure it was like a number 2 pencil, writing down like all this biomechanics data from like that pitcher is good and she's really good. Like these aren't above average pitchers. These are like some of the elite pitchers in our game.
Right.
What the hell are they doing? Are there similarities? Let me open up my spiral notebook and use a pencil and start jotting numbers down. Like literally that's what I was doing. And then I started really seeing the way the body was like feeding the arm before it dropped into layback. And that's where I was like, that there's this trunk arm timing. That trunk arm timing is the entire motion, but specifically when that foot lands, like where is the arm? Is that rotation from the body going to get into the arm? And so I really started talking about this concept of like the arm needs to be above layback when the foot lands, because when it lands, now the body will start to turn. Now the arm will start to slot. And that's the timing that it should occur in for the transfer of that energy. Right. And then I'm doing these debriefs. I'm like, yes, that is true. I'm not saying like, actually, I was totally wrong on that. That is true. Except what I sometimes see in these reports is that pitchers are very forward. They actually don't create a lot of rotation at all. Like their max amount of rotation at the top is under what we'd want. And the less rotation you get away from the target, the less you have to come back with. So essentially, they're really forward. Think about, I'm going to like exaggerate, just so we don't have a visual. It might be hard for listeners to hear, but like imagine like the middle of their chest, their belly button, just being like super forward toward the target most of the time. Not directly forward, obviously, but just that's the concept. And so when they land, the timing based on the amount of rotation they have left, if that makes sense, to come back to the target with, the appropriate trunk arm timing for that athlete who doesn't have enough rotation, for the arm to like get it from the body right away, based on what the body has available to it, really would be at layback, if that makes sense, right? Like that's the timing. It's like the body's basically over. It doesn't have so much to empty. So you've got to like, the arm's already got to be in position. So we're seeing these athletes who are in this like traditional good trunk arm timing, arm above layback, but their body's under rotated and they're throwing very slow because there's this like gap of time where the body is like, it's over, but the arm's not in position to receive it at layback yet. And so there's like gap of time. The transfer of energy is dead. And now it's like just the arm. And so I was like, it's just so interesting. That's an example of things that I actually see a lot. And I think like, yes, it's not that position doesn't matter because like I said, we're going for rotational stretch. That's how you pull it and release it. But it's not just of the body. The body has to then do that with the arms. For you, the same, right? For you, for hitting. The arms are the same because they're holding the barrel, right? They're holding the bat and our arm is holding the ball. And so it's like, yes, they have to generate rotation. So position matters in order to get that rotation. But assuming that's happening, like then timing is just like, it doesn't matter if you're just like rotating, if there's not this like syncing of timing. So yeah, I think we just like, that's this element of this like stretch and release. It's not static. It's not in phases. It's just continuous. Are they moving together? And I just really think we missed the boat on that concept because like, it's actually really difficult to measure.
Right.
How could a typical like person giving lessons measure things like that? You know? So we just go for like kind of the still shot concept. And so what we really have the luxury of doing, not just through like our lesser versions of, you know, our wearable sensors that aren't like high quality biomechanics, but we know what that data is telling us in comparison to itself. And then we have obviously high quality motion capture data in the biomechanics lab at UNO. Is now we literally can watch that. It's why the force plates are so important. It's like you could get in the best load, in the best timing of load. It's your forward weight shift. That looks good. But if you don't get off the ground on time, you did not transfer that energy. Like that's a huge bust in the kinetic chain. I feel like I hate using that because that was cool 5 years ago. And now it's like, we don't really know what we're talking about, you know, but it's basically in this transfer of energy. And so the timing is everything. And I'm just seeing more and more of pitchers being in decent position, but the timing of it is off. They're not understanding when to create the load, when to get off of the ground, in what window of time they have to accomplish something, where the arm should be based on how much stretch the body is creating. So I just think it's kind of I think it's kind of complicated. We've been talking about it internally at OGX, and obviously every one of our like employees and staff members, their brains work like this because that's what our everyday world is.
Right.
We, you know, like we have access, all of us have access to data like this. So we're like, yeah, that makes sense. But I was like, you know, this is just kind of the way to show people how to do this. It's not easy. Honestly, it's why like this up and coming, every tech company wants to like get in the world of like biomechanics. And I get it because it's like, but I don't know. It's hard. I just think of like, if you don't have the like quality biomechanics and the ability to really explain, it ends up like dumbing it down in a way that's really detrimental in my mind. Even if you knew the position pieces, you got to have this much, this degree of flexion, this degree of this, which we've worked hard on our end to create like ranges like that and understand. If you only have that, that's not good.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So anyway,
Well,
we've been having those discussions. That's just like an average, just like mid-afternoon lunch discussion at OGX. Like,
when we see hitters, you know, I think one of the things that we know is kind of a cause and effect situation for hitting is that when they don't get that stretch, when they don't put themselves in position at the right time to get that stretch, they create it. And the time that's happening where it needs to be created, where it's like go time to hit the ball, is, you know, right around the time that you're about to bring the bat forward. And so the easiest way to create it, and what often happens, is they create it with their arms in some way. And so what we'll see is like a locking out, you know, this like arm
same in pitching.
everyone sees, or early slot, we call it. Like they basically end up in like, they've created it by this move. So it's like elbow kind of driving in, I guess, or, you know, and what I think is hard, this is, I'm sure true in pitching too, but what I think is hard is that that's the most obvious thing to see, right? So when you're hearing things around the softball fields and parents and coaches, it's like when you hear don't drop your hands or don't lock your arm out or those things, you know, it's like, I feel at this point, I'm like, Kaylia feels like triggered by it because I've harped on it so much, but it's just not really a cue we use very often or talk about because it is the result of that person not getting stretch.
Yeah, you're like, you got to create stretch somewhere. What's worse than doing that would be to be in a better position, stretchless.
Yeah, right.
Like then you have nothing and it's empty. Like then she's gonna roll. Sally's gonna roll ground balls at 13 miles per hour. I'm not gonna like that.
Totally. We have an athlete who's in college now who had a pretty severe, like how she created stretch was, it was so extreme that I feel like Laura and I have talked about it. Like basically I was like, does she have access to some sort of mobility? Like there's something there. What she could positionally put her arms in to create stretch was, you know, it ended up being like back elbow, almost at belly button, but the bat was flat back here. It's just like, it's hard for me to even like get into that position. So it definitely was something that, and she, you know, came to us years ago in that position. And we certainly made adjustments and tried to correct some of the like trunk things. But I remember, 3 years ago when she assessed, I said in her in her debrief, like, because they came to me basically like, we know this is not position, like, you know, she's dropping her hands or however they
terrible position. Right.
And I said, we have to be very careful taking that away, because this kid had a high exit velocity, and that was clearly how she was getting her power. So I was like, you know, yes, it's not a great position for certain pitches. You know, you're going to see like hard velo in or a good backspin in or something. It's going to be hard to get to that positionally. But what we ended up doing is, yes, putting her body in as much of a good position. It's a very hard pattern to break, and it's the way she gets power. And so we focus a lot more on like picking pitches, pitch selection. Like, you know, there was a lot of things of just like, this is kind of what your body does. And if we take it away, it's not going to be great. You hit the ball hard right now. And she had a lot of success at a high level, you know, and we'll see how college unfolds for her. And we've had to dance on the line of how much are we really going after this, and how much is this just how your body creates that stretch. So it's so interesting because obviously, I mean, it unfortunately, the way that they create stretch impacts bat path a lot, you know, and so bat path
totally
impacts
it's the same in arm slot
and things.
Yeah,
right.
That's what happens. And at the cost, that athlete definitely has holes in her swing.
Totally. And if you watch, probably, and then college is going to be
spot she can cover.
Yes.
So it's like everything's risk reward. Everything is risk reward. Like what we chase in like the world of pitching and hitting. This is also what I didn't think this podcast was going to be about, but like, I really don't like the world of people trying to get into biomechanics. Not because I'm like, where's the people? That's not it at all. Because I'm like, just it's very difficult. It needs to be like good, solid, high quality data, or keep it on the ball. Because keep it on just the tech companies in my mind really should stay on ball flight, because it's what matters. And what I know definitely the pitching world struggles with, and what we have a lot of trouble with, we seek positions. We want to go after mechanics without understanding, does that position that looks bad, is it actually creating more stretch? Of course it's at the consequence of something, like maybe some forearm discomfort, you know, maybe like she only has up and doesn't have down, whatever. There's always you get this for the cost of this, but that strategy gives her stretch. So we don't want to chase better positions and then put the title biomechanics on it. And we created less rotational stretch for her, right? And but the pitching community loves to do that. We love to chase positions. We love to talk about, her patterns are better. And there's
what you feel in control of. It's what you feel in control of.
Exactly. But it's like, in my mind, I think like, it's not about positions. Like, again, it's not that position doesn't matter, because when position breaks down, it doesn't give you enough rotation. You can't get rotational stretch at all. Even if you're on time, there's no stretch. I use that. I talk about that a lot in debriefs. I'll say to someone like, your motion's very underwhelming, even though that probably sounds not nice. It's underfueled. I'll use those phrases all the time, meaning there's not enough stretch here. And we can see that. And there's some holes in how we measure that in 4D, but obviously we have the UNO data to help like support what we're looking at. And like what we're going for is stretch and the sinking of the stretch from the body to the arm. That's what we're chasing. And so we can't just see it as let's fix all the positions, you know?
Right.
And so, yeah, we just are really guilty of that. We really go after, let's make them look in better positions. And we have no idea, but did that take stretch away, which can't happen and often happens. And so if it takes stretch away.
I would argue too, like a lot of this comes from the fact that we start the skill so early at a time where you can't get stretch appropriately, because stretch comes from stability, you know, like it comes from stability. And so there's an element of all of these things I'm referencing in bat paths. If you watch, you know, my son 100% every time he swings drops here and does that because it's literally how he has to swing in order to.
Henry, what you're talking about, everyone will be like, stop dipping your hands.
Right. But it's like, you know, he literally
like, dude, I'm sticking
to
a sock
that
with my son.
So
it's painful.
So I think that there's an element of like, we have that too, where it's like this conversation of based on their age, how much are you really going after that? And trying to, it's kind of like our talk from last week. It's like, you're just trying to set yourself up to jump to a different road. Like that 100% is true.
You're absolutely right.
Too. And so it's like, sometimes we have athletes who are hitting puberty late who train with us, but they're still pre-puberty. And sometimes there will be some conversation with their parents, like, don't we need to fix this? And I'm like, unfortunately, I don't think we can right now. This is not something like she needs that move to create stretch. You
Absolutely.
Can't sling a slingshot, loose. Like it
Right.
has to have stretch from somewhere, but unless you are stable through the middle, which you can't be, or you're at least, maybe you can be, sometimes there's some stability but then they're going to lose it and the body's changing. So there's there's definitely a dance at that age, but like when they are first learning to swing. And so it's kind of like, why I would say what happens in hitting is and when you then take that athlete and you put them in super structured lessons or whatever, and they do that over and over and over, what we see is like, then it's very hard when they hit puberty. They shouldn't come to that stage able to do that, but then it's so hard to break that. They've done that way of creating stretch.
Well, let's bring in the like words that no one can stand. And like explain them now, like movement solutions. When people say movement solutions, It's like kinetic chain, movement solutions. Like what the hell are we even talking about? This is what movement solutions is. It's like right now, their brain knows they have to create stretch. You have to release something. You have to release something in order to create power, right? And so that's what the release the bad head, release this. It's a like tension and a release of it. So they have to create it somewhere. Now you don't want them to get stuck in that position. It's just right now their solution for where to create. But as you're saying, the reason why we do talk about what's your posture, what's your posture? Because what we're trying to get to is rotation, and you can't have rotation without good posture. That's the stability concept you're talking about, right? So you got to have that stability to hold good posture enough to generate some rotation in the body. So as they start getting stronger, older, more stable, able to do that, now they're able to start generating stretch somewhere else in a better place, right? So like that is movement solutions. Allow them to have freedom of movement, explore movement. Like these are phrases we use all the time. And every time I say it, I roll my eyes. I'm like, what am I even talking about? I mean, I know what I'm talking about, but they're the phrases people hear all the time. That sounds like, what are you, there's no like, give me some substance.
It's why training, what I would say for younger athletes, younger hitters, it's why training, like not too much of just the same thing over and over, which is what we do. We do front toss with their bat and a ball over and over and over. And so, one way to kind of feed some change, and what obviously we use as a part of our training, is different weighted bats, different angles of tossing. So it's kind of like let the younger athletes at a minimum, if you're like, we got to get in structured, we got to get in structured stuff because it's what people are doing. And you feel some pressure there and it feels like the right path for you. Create some variation in it to at least not have them just doing the same thing, because they're going to do that. Like we don't see 10-year-olds. So we do a med ball toss that's very related to exit velocity. And we think about it, the way you throw that is to create tension in your core and release it at the right time in a very tiny window.
Same concept, and simpler concept, but yeah.
And so it relates a lot to hitting exit velocity. And so we don't see 10-year-olds coming and throwing that ball 30. Like they can't do that, like it's just like, it doesn't, unless they're,
honestly,
Krista, which is like a whole other topic.
Here I go again of why pitching shouldn't start till 13, but this is the explanation of why. This concept we talked about in last week's thing of like, they can't manipulate their hand position is because in order to do that, there has to be this sense of like, of such control over the stretch from body to arm at layback. And did you ever see what kids like below 13 look like from layback down? It's like a folding chair.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I think
the one that just like collapses. Like that's not.
I obviously use videos sometimes of Katie Stewart now swinging, and it's like I have like, this is what we need to do. I think I did post it for her when she went away to school, but like a compilation of a kid like that who now is and has always been on the higher side of power. It's not like she didn't have a lot of power as a kid. She's always been on a higher side of power.
We taught her that. That was us.
But like what her swing looked like when she was 13 was atrocious. Like it was a mess. But it wasn't like then she got to a place, thankfully, we knew enough somehow to keep it just different. Probably because we were guessing for so long at the beginning that created variation because we changed things so much.
Right.
But she got to a place now where she's able to make change and to talk about these nuances. It wasn't because she's always had that swing. It wasn't because we fixed her mechanics. Like it just like the swing was a mess when she was younger because that is how she needed to create power. She also had like, we talk about this a lot, which I think this probably correlates a little bit in pitching too, but in hitting at younger ages to create power, because they can't do that. They can't tap into that short window. They need some momentum. So like, it's fine for them to have a leg kick. It's fine for them to have a big move. They need this like momentum concept to do it more than they can create it in shorter windows. So when you look at, I always think like it's such a kind of beautiful example, because Katie and I didn't do it intentionally. It just was kind of like following her maturation and where she was. She went from like this big giant move that she had a lot, and it has like over time been able to get smaller and simpler because she can create power in a shorter window and on time. And so I think like, it's also like, you don't need to, you can let them do that and it's fine. It's not going to ruin them. And it probably will help them at the phase they're in. And also it's probably not a great move at the highest level of the game. And so we can train for the game that's in front of us and the age that's in front of us. We don't have to, be doing all of that. So I think that's, understanding of what is actually happening in the highest level, but then again, just continuing to realize that like an 8-year-old can't do that, and so.
No, absolutely. They can't. And a 10-year-old can't do it. And a 12-year-old can't do it. And I think of like, this is not because they're not a good athlete. Like that's what we were trying to say earlier. It's not because they're a good athlete, but what that requires just from a physical stability and strength concept under max power is not, it's a physically mature concept that is it's not even like 13, 14, I mean, it's like, and so yes, this idea of they're going to have to get in messed up positions in order to create stretch, or they're going to be stretchless. So if you are really chasing positions at young age, which is 95% of like all lesson models to get in good position, you are likely doing it. One, you're probably they're going to create stretch somewhere else and get rid of one weird position for another weird position. That's why you do that. Or you have less stretch. But people don't link. They're just like, see how much better that was. But sometimes we see people are like, this happened to an athlete that we worked with. She's in college now, but she, like, I don't know, just was like, I'm looking for a different route. I'm looking for XYZ. And so over the summer was like, went down this very particular like style. And we work with her where she's at in college, and we're able to like measure where she's at. I mean, she literally lost 5 miles per hour. And everything's just like very stiff, like tension. Like there's no like release of, there's no rotation. She's under rotated and everything. It's so much elbow bend. There's no concept of like stretch and go. There's no stretch. It's just hold tension, right? We know what these patterns tend to look like. She's down 5 miles per hour. And I'm like, did you not know that? But all she does is study video of like, see, you look good here. And it was at the loss of stretch. And so but no one knows that because we're not attaching patterns. That's why we said you have to attach patterns to ball flight, right? This is the concept. So if you are trying to really get rid of certain patterns before an athlete it's why we measure movement quality and why we measure power. Do they have the ability to basically create stretch in the places they're supposed to? And if the answer is no, then they're going to do it in weird places then. And all we want to make sure is that that we're growing their ability to create it in the right places. And then when they do, they're not just stuck. So like if your 11-year-old goes to lessons, they are just working on their hands, doing the same thing over and over. And why we say that's lowering your ceiling is you're just training your body to do a very like stretchless, your power profile is going down. Your adjustability level is just going down. And so it might make you better in the moments. But as you then have the ability to create some stretch in the right places, it doesn't matter. You're like stuck in your hands only wanting to do this one thing. Do you like that? That's how I'm hitting in here.
I know that really was like 1985. I haven't
totally. But you know what I mean? Like that's all of these conversations we've been having. Totally. All these conversations we've been having over the last couple of weeks, like this is what it all comes back to. And this is, I guess, the best way to describe like why we look at things so differently. Like we take in biomechanics, but we never give a biomechanics report without showing movement quality and power. We have to be able to show people like this is right now where you're recruiting that stuff from.
Right.
So we can go try to fix it. And it's why we're like, you don't have to do strength and conditioning with us. You can do it somewhere else, but you sure as hell shouldn't skip that part. You can't because you don't have the ability to do things well in pitching. So when people just do the pitching lesson route and they're like movement quality, which most people, their movement quality is terrible, their power is terrible unless they like, are training. And so when that's the case, I'm like, I mean, you can get in position. Your coach can like teach you position, but like that's at the cost of ball flight data.
Right. Yeah.
And like, we just don't get that. And that's why I really am like, it's tough.
Yeah. Well, we talked about, we've gone down this route. So this is something that we've made the mistake of for a little bit. But like, when you determine whether an athlete is good or not based on their biomechanics data, like, that's a very dangerous game.
It's impossible. It's literally not possible.
And it's because a lot of bad things lead to good results. And as we have said, that doesn't mean go for it. There's always a trade-off. That athlete is probably either has some injury risk or is limited in her role because of something. Like, there's certainly a trade-off. So you have to play that. Do we need to go after this because of XYZ? I mean, Major League Baseball players are playing this every off season, which is like, okay, I'm at a risk for X. And so do I need to go to fix this? But what's that going to do to my ball flight? And so, but what makes an athlete elite or not is what she does to the ball. Like, period. What she does to the ball, whether it's hitting or pitching, that's it. It has nothing to do with what
the patterns.
The reason we go after patterns is to either influence that if she's not elite, or if she can make change to it, or, as we said, because sometimes there's trade-offs and she's hurting, there's a variety of things, and so, like, they don't make sense without the other, because you got to have
Krista, this is why we're the best. We're the best because we're allowed to say that because it's true. We are the best. I'm also not humble when I know something is true. Not
aspiring to be humble here. Yep.
I'm not like that. Anyway, never have been. So we're the best. Where was I? Oh, right. We're the best because we understand the connectivity of the entire story. It's why I used to always say, like, I can't stand people like, they're the biomechanics people. Like, no, we're not. But we understand the importance of knowing that piece, in addition to knowing how well are you able to stabilize and rotate. How fast can you do it? Can you produce power from it? What ball flight are we getting here? So the combination, we're the best because we understand the whole puzzle. When you are only going to go seek one avenue of it, which is almost every other place out there, right? Like, it's why, like, okay, if you go to a camp or you go to whatever and you're just getting ball flight, I'm like, that's not the best.
I was just going to say,
I influence it.
Call with a high school athlete who's interested in coming to us. She's committed already, but she went to a different camp last year.
Yeah.
And I actually have seen this athlete's ball flight. So this is really interesting because I don't know if the ball flight she received was wrong or if, like, it does happen. Like, she threw differently, like she had lost it since I saw it. But when I saw her ball flight, she was like bullet. She also had some down, and then she had some backspin. Then that's where she kind of lives. She's like a high velo kid that has some backspin. And she went to a camp and they were like, you throw all down. You have only sink. And so you need to go after that. And so her current coach doesn't really like use technology, but is open to it, and also like brought her to us. And, but she was like, it kind of like freaked us out because we really have been going after Rise Curve, and that seems to be successful. And just with her eye, like, they didn't have data on it. Like, that's been who she is. And so to have this high level place that has data, but then the athlete on the call to me was like, yeah, I said, which pitch was it? And she was like, my fastball, it was -4. And I was like, oh, like, -4 is not a lot, So I was just like, let's just do your biomechanics assessment. Let's do your assessment. Let's get the ball flight. And I said, like, there's more to the story. So one, like, if you, I've seen this kid throw, and I know at some point she had some backspin, so I know she can't access that. And I said that sometimes, like, -4 is all you can get based on your patterns, and you might not want to chase that if your up stuff is your good stuff. And, like, we'll see all of that from the story. But I think it's like example to what you're saying, which is you can't just, you also can't just pluck.
That was the number with the most break. It's like, actually, when we maximize your neutral fastball is probably going to be more like -1, and that's better. Like, right. I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there, but that's true. Like, I think you're just taking one piece of the story. I will say that can happen. You're probably unlikely. The majority of the time, you're not going to just go to a camp or get your ball flight and get information, and then it, like, negatively impact you. It probably just won't help you. You have no idea how to actually go after that. Even if she's like, I'm trying to work on down, she's not going to be able to, you know what I'm saying? So, like, without understanding how you're attacking, how you're actually achieving something and how you're not getting other things, it's difficult. So it's like, it's good. You need to have the information. It doesn't help you with like changing anything. It's not a training thing. But what I actually think is like dangerous is to go to a camp where they give you biomechanics information. Like, if they're going to put ball flight up against it, fine. But if they're just going to give you I have a plate in my hand. I'm handing it. Here's a biomechanics report. That is, I would say 9 times out of 10, you are going to make yourself worse. There's no ball flight. Someone is telling you, like, run, put your headphones on, close your eyes, and get the hell out of there. You absolutely cannot have someone tell you if your body is in good or bad, elite or not, and there's no ball flight telling you, essentially. Like, you can say, oh, that's not optimal. Yeah, that's one thing. It's not optimal. But like, what we know is, like, it's not about chasing optimal. It's about understanding this balance of what you are getting, what you are. It's all risk reward here. You have to understand both. So I would say, going to camp where you just get ball flight, it's going to be good information for you. It won't change anything. That's the end of it. If you go strictly to someone who gives you a biomechanics report, that is dangerous. And like, I will say that is absolutely dangerous. And in no world do I think like that's what you need to make your ball flight better. Absolutely not. I would say the odds are that you are going to make your ball flight worse. So you better track the hell out of that. You know what I mean? On your own, because you are likely to just like follow this world. Not good. And I hate that. Like, I do hate that tech companies are trying to go down that route. I'm like, why?
No. Why not?
Why not? I know, but just like, I feel like it'd be better to just go like video with ball flight.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to get into nitty gritty of like you were at 30 degrees of whatever. It's just like, I think you're like, I like it. I just think of like, understand when you're doing this, it produces this. When you're doing this, it produces this. The connectivity of that makes sense.
Right.
But living in biomechanics world by yourself, I'm like, oh my gosh. It feels like we're going backward. We're like, we're so smart now. Like, so smart that you just launched yourself back into 1998. Like, that's not good.
Right. Because you're seeking it without understanding it. Yeah. It's been part of our limitations in hitting college assessments. And hopefully we're going to have some solution here soon. But I think it's just, I have refused because I'm like, there's 25 people and we won't just come do sensors. Like, it's just not, we wouldn't do that. So we have to collect ball flight on all of them, which means a machine and lots of swings to get enough for hitting, because there's lots of like, it's not like pitching where you can get 3 pitches of each. There's, so you got to test so much and do so much. Mm-hmm. So there's been some limiting factor to that and figuring out what makes most sense, and I think like you could piece it together if they had some ball flight. So there's some options that we like, can do, but it's the same thing. It's just like, if I went down, we did do biomechanics on Katie this summer. If I was just like, we're going to chase all these things. She just had a killer breakout, freshman year. So it's just, again, we talked about this, but like I got her ball flight from the year, and what we went after was the stuff that was holding her back from things that will be able to be exposed this year, not just like random things that she didn't need to go after. I think it's just, that's the point of it, is just being very thoughtful around that risk reward benefit. So
totally.
Yeah. I don't know if we thought we were going to get
there's that. And you know what? We never know what the hell we're talking about and where it's going to go, but that's the beauty of it. I don't always register. I almost rarely register my own volume, but like 5 minutes ago, I'm like, I'm screaming. So Paul is definitely going to have to like balance out volume a little bit, because to all the listeners, sorry, I didn't realize I'd get myself so worked up. Clearly this topic fires me up and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think people are used to being screamed at by you. That's part of the gig.
I mean, I just am like, I don't know. I just think it's really important. We got us to start thinking about it. It's like, stop trying to be right. Everybody out there, stop trying to be right.
Right.
It's not that easy. It's not that black and white. Stop trying to be the thing. I figured it out. I'm the one who knows this when you move like this. Like, that's how it works. So as soon as you stop trying to be right and just understand all of the factors that are involved, the only right is per athlete based on those variables we talked about. Because it's only her risk reward, where she's getting here. What her holes are, is that worth compromising this, that? So I just think, we got to understand that. And it is the beauty of what we do. It's why we believe in our assessment process so much. It's why even when people don't they come for biomechanics assessment. They don't have to train. Usually they want to because they're like, I want to get better. You got to show me how to do it. But beyond that, it's why we are so much more than a training facility. And it's why we actually have a lot of people right now seeking the biomechanics assessment as a standalone product. And not whether or not they are interested in continuing on with like ongoing training with us or not. It's because that information matters to understand like what's available to you right now. If you want to have more available to you, here is how you would measure that it's coming along. You know what I mean? Right. You have a strength coach, what James and I talked about a couple weeks ago. You have a strength coach. You've got to be able to bring them this information. This is what matters. This is going to allow you to create stretch in better places, X, Y, Z. If this starts getting better, this is what the ball would start to look like. The ball flight would start to look like. You've got to measure that. You know what I mean? So that information alone, it's like show them the puzzle and what pieces they have in the moment where they choose to sort of like train those puzzle pieces up to them, but at least show it to them. So anyway, I don't know. This can go on forever and ever. Good talk, though, Krista.
Yeah.
Liked it.
Yeah, for sure. And until next week when we'll talk about who knows.
Who knows? Try not to scream at everybody next time. I don't know what got into me.
All right. Next week.